we are live. We are ready to go. Sure.
Okay, so welcoming everyone again for a pilot feature today. All those who have joined us this evening and all those who are watching us live on YouTube, and also those who will watch a recording. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's a beautiful opportunity to meet up and get to know each other and share our stories. It's a very special time on the planet. We have a crisis at hand, and every crisis brings with it a transformation of some sort. And whole of humanity is, I think, undergoing some sort of a transformation. And you can also feel in your own individual lives that if we do allow, if we have the space and the quietude, we can see this transformation happening in our own selves. Also, it can be a beautiful opportunity to look into ourselves and create space, at least through being peaceful and quiet, to allow a transformation to take place. And today, very special day for us, a very special evening. We've invited Vrun, not Varun, Vrun, with a wonderful story that concerns all of us pilots, how to balance our work life, family life, and our flying. We all want to fly more and more, but something or the other keeps coming in the way. So we thought it might be a good idea to get someone who's done really well in this regard, who's planned his flying really well. It's been a joy for me and our team to know Vrun. Very special, very beautiful person. I mean, part of our high in Tamil pilots for us instructors is to enrich our lives by meeting the most wonderful people on the planet. People who want to fly. So they're all very special. And so is the case in this one. I find Vrun, he's humble. That you can hear him when he goes, Hanji sir. Nobody else says Hanji sir. He says Hanji sir. Very humble, very earnest. A lover of life, I would say, who is very thorough very interested in life, very earnest student of life, I would say. And we had lovely conversations, and I've loved his approach to the sport, and I've seen him grow, from ground zero to, a beautiful place that he's in today. And I see making of a class pilot in him, and really very happy to be sharing his, story. And we'd like to feature, more and more pilots in a pilot feature. I think life is all about exploring, discovering, but also sharing. So if you have a story to share, welcome. And we also get a chance to know our club pilots better. We've not met them all. But here we get a chance, we're given an opportunity to meet all of us, meet everyone, and listen to their beautiful stories. So we hand you over to the man who brings or is able to get the fine balance of life in flying and work in flying and family and flying, and the rest is over to Vrun. Go for it.
Thanks a lot, sir. So electricity went off and I missed a part of it.
Oh, good.
Quickly,
baby.
I connected to my. Connected to my girlfriend's hotspot.
Oh, thank her, please, from all of us. But you not missed much. You can see it on the YouTube later. But you may start, please. Welcome, 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 Vrun.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you, everyone, for being here. The idea of this talk is to share my journey so far, how I started and how I went about in progressing in my paragliding journey, and what all I learned and my observations, and how I planned my training. I mean, it did not happen like I started with paragliding and everything was like very tip top and planned. Things happened on the go. I kept processing the information. I mean, the knowledge that I was gathering and what I was missing and what I was not. And thereby things happened as I was going about the training and flying. So I have divided this talk into 4 parts. The first part is the journey so far. The second part is the observation and the learnings. The third part is how I planned my training. And the fourth part is a small talk about the balance. And so I'll start with the journey so far. So paragliding always fascinated me. When I saw a paraglider, like the first time that I saw a paraglider, I was going to my boarding school. My father was taking me to the boarding school in Ranikhet. So Bhimtal, there was a small hill station, Bhimtal, and that's where I saw the paraglider for the first time. And I was like, why? How is this person flying? It seems just like a piece of cloth, and so it excited me even as a child. But I mean, at that point, I couldn't think about doing it. But at a later point in time, when I had the resources and the opportunity, there was a moment when I was having a few beers with my friend, as in friends, basically. So one of my friends approached me and he whispered in my ear, Varun, could you join me for a paragliding course in Pune? And I thought, why not? So I agreed, and I did not know where paragliding happened, where the schools were. So he did all the research. He was the one who chose Temple Pilots. I had no idea about it. And he even paid my fees, which I obviously returned him later. So that's how the journey started. And I ended up in Temple Pilots. I'd opted for a 10 days club certification course. And I started with the training. Initially, it was more of just following what the instructors are teaching you, and it was more of mechanically doing things, because in the beginning you don't have any feel of the glider. So 5-6 days down the line, I realized that 10 days training is actually not enough. It is just a basic elementary course. And so I decided, I had a talk with Avi sir and other instructors, that I could extend my training to the adventure pilot level. So I had some leave days left with me, so I went with it. It took me about 16 odd days to complete the adventure pilot certification requirements, all the tasks and all. Though it was a very, I wouldn't say things were easy, but with the help of instructors, I could manage to, complete my certification. After that, when I went back home, I had a basic set of skills about all the different aspects of paragliding. But what I lacked is, how should I go about it now? And there was a moment of confusion. So all I thought was, and all I had learned till then, is that I have to keep flying. Anywhere I find a block of leaves, or I can manage to gather leaves together, I would just go and fly. So this happened in November 2018. And in December, I came to Temple Pilots again, to my school, and directly went to the training hill. I had just 4 days with me, but I started with the challenge. Yeah. So the challenge in the training was to crack takeoff. So I started with my kiting and, going ahead with it. After that, I once received a message from Sachin sir that the school was going to Panchgani for thermaling course, and he suggested that it would be a better idea to enhance my skills by joining the course. It seemed like a very good idea. Until then, I had the basic feel of the glider, and I had already experienced a part of thermaling. Like there was a small thermal, and an instructor helped me in getting into the thermal and giving me a glimpse of what it is. So January, I went for the thermaling course in Panchgani, and while over a conversation when we were having dinner, I simply asked Avi sir as to my wish was to fly in the big mountains in Himalayas, and so I presented my idea to him and asked him how should I go about it, because at that moment I had no idea of uh, you know of how to either in terms of the skills or in terms of the learnings. So he suggested me a very good plan. He said, why don't you do something after this course? You come to uh, Kamshet in April and you do kiting, you improve your takeoff skills and you fly, improving upon your basic skills. And then what you can do is you can join us in Bali. Bali would be a good experience for you because there's a lot of airtime involved, and there also you can practice a lot of maneuvers. And then you'll have a sufficient amount of experience where you can decide upon, and the skills also where you can decide upon as to either go for a basic SIV course or an advanced SIV course according to your level, the level that you reach at that moment. And then I think you'll be ready for beer. That seemed like a plan to me. So January, while attending the basic thermaling course, I could manage to learn a little about thermaling. I did my first cross country there. It was a very small cross country. It was just about 15 kilometers, but the experience was very enriching. When I climbed that a thermal on the second day, and I was almost like 5,000 feet. And when I looked below with a bird's eye view, things looked very amazing at that moment. I was like thrilled with my experience, and even that cross country experience was very, very enriching. So from there, next, when I went back home, I planned my leaves. I coincided them with these flying programs that I talked about, and in April I ended up in Kamshet in the Pavna site. It was a beautiful site, and one thing which I kept hearing the instructors and they were talking about was kiting. They insisted a lot on kiting. And so initially when I went there, I wanted to do the takeoff on my own, and I was like very pro with it, like I want to do it. So Ankush sir just whispered in my ear, Varun, at this time, the conditions are very strong and you've just come. So it would be better if let us help you with the takeoff. And then later I asked him, sir, why couldn't I do it? So he said, you have to achieve a certain skill in order to do justice with your takeoff. So that struck something in me. And I was like, I will first focus on gaining the skills. And so out of the 9 days that I spent in Pavna, almost 5 days were completely dedicated to kiting right from the beginning. And I achieved a lot in those 5 days because I was continuously doing kiting. So how it helped is that I started gaining momentum in my training. That every time that I was kiting for the next day, the previous day's the skill was actually helping me out for the next task or the next task. And when I went for the takeoffs, though the takeoffs were not very refined, but I could do them and I could see where I have to improve. So after April, then was the time to go to Bali in August. And it was a beautiful site to fly. We had a lot of fun there, but also a lot of learning. So Bali was coastal flying. It was a very different experience. And I did many top landings there, almost like about 20 to 25 top landings. So one thing that I, really cherished was to gain this skill. And also we did a lot of kiting on the beach and beach landings, and gaining height and going out for a maneuver to practice 360 reversals and all. So there was a lot of learning involved there, and also a lot of airtime. So by the time I finished the Bali trip, as Avisar already told me, I had already gained 35 hours of airtime and a lot of kiting and a lot of takeoff practice. I could do independent takeoffs in Bali as well, and independent landings. And in the last debriefing, where I had finished my training, I could see the satisfaction on my instructor's face. They were very happy with what I was doing. And even I was happy about how the training went. So there I decided to go for the SIV course, as it was very apparent that, okay, I have reached a certain skill level. And so I ended up in Bilaspur for the SIV in September and October. The takeoff at Bilaspur was very tricky. On the second day on my takeoff, I had a bad takeoff incident where my glider had a frontal collapse and I almost jumped about 25 feet, managed to save myself from an injury, but my glider got damaged. But Avi sir helped me and he decided that I would be able to get my glider repaired. So we took a local paraglider pilot's help there, and he provided the kit. So I got an experience there to repair my own glider. He helped me out. He told me how it is to be done, and him and the instructors, Ankush sir and Jitu sir, we all worked on repairing the glider, and it was an amazing experience. And it got my hopes back. Basically, I thought that at that moment my SIV is gone, and I would just go back to maybe go to Beer for like further training, but SIV is not happening. And all that I had gained till then, I had really worked hard for that moment, and it seemed like it is slipping from my hands. But the way it happened, it was very magical, frankly. And my glider got repaired, and I started with the SIV, and SIV went. I mean, it was a very very enriching experience, because the kind of glider control that I learned in SIV, I mean, getting into different situations, all that can happen with a glider, all the wrong things or the out of the envelope things that can happen with the paraglider, I was able to see them. I was able to experience and practice how to get out of it. And this boosted my confidence, frankly. So further to that was Beer. My final, I mean, for the initial part, my final goal to reach Beer, fly there. So started with my thermaling course. There also my instructors were with me. And after the SIV, I mean, I had done a thermaling course in Panchgani also, but in Beer, the air was a little rough. But the kind of control, the kind of connect that I felt with my glider, it was, I mean, beyond words. I could really feel the air around me, the environment, and everything in a way that everything seemed connected. And I was one with everything, basically. So I discussed about it in the debriefing. I told my instructors that I'm feeling really good about the way the things are going on. And because I had a bad incident at takeoff, I knew that I have to work on my takeoff skills. This is something which is lacking behind. So this is something which I have to really focus on. That was the major reason why I came back to Kamshet for 14 days in November end. And 9 days were completely dedicated to kiting at the training hill. So maybe on the second or the third day, I got hooked to kiting. Now it was not more of a kind of a scenario where I was working hard or I was trying to achieve something. I was enjoying kiting. And it started with, small, giving myself small tasks. And the instructors were also helping wherever I was lacking or making a mistake. My instructors were, were there with me, and they helped me out. And with that, I could, achieve my kiting goals. So by the end of, and also the flying days that I had, my instructors gave me, and I also gave myself different flight plans, practicing things during flying, and some challenges, different kinds of approaches for landing. So basically I was preparing myself for different scenarios as to what all I can face once I think about going on independent flying. And even, in that moment where I was ending that training, I could see that, okay, my instructors are happy with what I'm doing, and they are really confident about me, and I'm confident about myself. I've worked hard to reach this place, and uh, the skill level has come to a point where I can think of, flying independently, and the knowledge also that they imparted, it was also reflecting through my flying. With that in mind, and also one small discussion with Abhi sir during SIV, where after completing my SIV, he prompted that, you can think of now moving on to your next glider. And it gave me a hint. And even I was like thinking about it, because I could more or less complete my advanced SIV with this glider, which I was flying, and I could utilize it to a point where I was like thorough with my glider. And so with the idea of, now focusing on thermaling and cross country, now I was on a focused journey from now on, which was to get into thermaling, knowing what thermaling is all about, and the cross country part, which would come later. So I shifted to my second glider, which is EN mid to high B, and I went to B in February for flying independently for the first time. It was, I mean, it was a challenging experience, because the weather that was there in October in Beer and the weather that was there in February, it was very different. The weather was very dynamic. Things were happening very fast. Big clouds were forming and thunderstorms were happening. So there was a lot which was going on, and I had to decipher. I had to like really use my knowledge at every moment, from the point where I had to choose my takeoff point right according to the winds, and assessing with every takeoff as to if I'm going right or not, if my approach is correct or not. And all the safety aspect of those days were completely in my hand. So there was no one who could, help me out in a situation. So I had to take all the decisions. So the first thing that I did was to keep the safety net very high. I did not take any risks, or I did not, I just flew in the envelope where I had already flown in Beer with the instructors. I didn't like roam around or went about going in different directions. I just practiced thermaling. I did almost 5 flights. Out of those, 3-4 flights were complete thermaling flights of about duration of about 1 hour 40 to 1 hour 50 minutes, and transitioning and seeing where I'm, if I'm able to core it, if I'm able to carve it and map it. So these were the skills which I was working on. Things were not the same as with the instructors, obviously. I was, it seemed like when the previous time I had come, there were people around me, they were club pilots and they were instructors. So it was more of a very fun-filled journey. This time, me and my girlfriend, we were alone. So the fun part was, that team part was not there. But yeah, it was a very enriching experience for me. The thing that I wanted to achieve, the thing that I set my goal for, I was able to do it in a safe manner. And this is what, made this journey a very beautiful one. So the journey part has ended, and I'm open for questions.
Okay, Avi has a question.
Okay, I have a question for you. So, you mentioned about kiting, and we heard that you mentioned kiting quite a bit, that you did spend quite a lot of, time kiting. But, what people might understand that, kiting is, okay, bringing the glider up and keeping it there, keeping it there, keeping it there. I just want you to, clarify as to what, kiting really means to you. And to also, clarify to the listeners that kiting is not just keeping the glider up, because just bringing the glider up and keeping it up in Pavna, it's like, easy. And just keeping it up there, you're not going to learn anything as such. So could you, go through the steps of kiting, where I remember seeing you on the, or I remember giving you a task of climbing up the hill with your glider when you had reached the advanced kind of a level. So if you could talk more about that kiting, because kiting, like they are building blocks, but the cementing, I think in your case, has been done by kiting. You put the bricks to make the wall, but the cementing has happened through kiting, I feel. So if you can share more, so club pilots with low air time,
Sure, sir.
and how it has helped you to get confident and improve your safety threshold. So that's the question. Thanks.
Right, sir. So obviously it started with bringing the glider up, and it started with controlling the glider with ANC risers initially. And initially it was more of a challenge to, to understand the glider behavior. If I'm bringing the C riser to the left, how is the glider behaving, how it is yawing, to just observe. And there the instructors helped me a lot. I mean, Vikas sir was there with me, and he started prompting me and making me realize what was happening. So from that moment where I had no idea about, about understanding the glider behavior. So I think kiting, how it helps is it makes us understand and connect with the glider. So initially it started with controlling with the A and C risers, from the C risers coming to brakes, controlling the glider with the brakes, doing different tasks like moving with the glider, keeping the glider at one place and keeping it above you, or uh, keeping the glider at different places in the power zone, like at 30% position, at 50% position, at 70% position, and making it stay there. So there were different tasks involved. And suppose it started with ANC risers. So I had to be good at the ANC riser control. Thereafter, when brakes happened, so I could manage to, do kiting with the brakes it took me about 2-3 days to get a hang of it. And now the next challenge was to move the glider to the left or to the right, which is, there's a term which I've forgotten about it. So basically moving with the glider. And then I started reverse takeoffs because of the skills that I had achieved. And I realized that, okay, more of it, I need more of it. More of it was, keeping the half of the glider folded and then inflating it. Now it was like, if suppose you have challenges like wind coming from different directions, and now you have to take off and the glider inflates differentially. It is not, slalom. Thanks a lot, Jitu sir. So basically slalom was taking the glider 45 degrees to the left and then 45 degrees to the right and moving with it to understand with the changing wind conditions, how the glider is behaving and what inputs it needs. So a very important lesson that we learn from kiting is that the input that we are giving to the glider, and in a very safe envelope, we are on the ground, we are not in air, and we have the whole authority of brakes to use and to see how the glider behaves. So basically, what it taught me initially is the input that I'm giving to the glider, how the glider is behaving, and if it requires that input now or it needs a modification. So understanding the glider behavior with the input that I'm giving, and so it refined my flying skills as well as my takeoff. And after that, so Ankush sir helped a lot in a manner that he was the guy who, who kept insisting me individually that, you should do kiting a lot. And once we had some parawaiting time at Pavna site, and he talked about 5 different ways of kiting. I have it written with me. I don't remember the exact sequence, but then he said, what you can do, first thing that you can do is control it with the brakes. Then you take the glider to the left side and keep it there, and then bring it back with the brakes to the right side and bring it back, move with the glider, and you stay at one. The third challenge was stay at one place with the brakes. You don't move. You keep the glider exactly there and you don't move. Then it was you sit with the glider and kite. So they were different. And then another challenge was to, like, as I told you, to fold the glider from one side and then inflating it with just brakes and risers from one side, and then getting it exactly above you. And thereafter, the next challenge was to kite and take the glider to the above, take the glider to the takeoff point from the landing point on the training hill. So basically moving with the glider at different slopes, which was very enhancing in terms of I could understand the glider behavior at different slope levels. Suppose if the slope was 45 degrees, how the glider was behaving. If it was 60 degrees, how the winds were affecting the glider in that moment. Sometimes the glider was pitching back. Sometimes the glider was wanting to pitch forward. And the glider control, basically. It helped me a lot in connecting with my glider. And that connect, not just helped me in attaining my takeoff skills, it also helped me in, in my flying. While I was doing my SIV, kiting was really helpful in letting me understand what my glider is doing and how much input it requires at that moment. So I'm not over controlling or under controlling the glider.
Okay, thank you.
Vrun, we have one more question by Sandeep Chauhan. So basically, he wants to know more about the gap in the training. So in your case, what was the gap between your first stint and then further consecutive ones? And then he's also asking about what's your suggestion, good practices for the time between first and second sessions, and how to keep in touch with the flying when you're away. What would you recommend?
So I was going to discuss it about it in the second part, but I'll answer the question and then I'll move to this part. And so when I came for my initial training, the reason why I moved to 20 days course from the 10 days course was I saw people coming to training after long gaps. And when they were at the training hill and when they were starting with, ground handling, they had forgotten about all the skills that they had attained in the previous time. There were people who had gaps of 6 months, of 1 year, of 2 years also. So they had forgotten everything actually. And it really, wasted a lot of time for them. They had to waste almost like 2-3 days to come back to the same point where they had left their training. And there must have been like almost 3-4 people who were like this. And I could realize that currency is very, very important, especially when you're training. Your training would only gain a pace. It would only have a momentum when there is a certain flow to it. So initially, as I told you, when I finished my APPI 3, the Adventure Pilot course, the next month I came, and I think what I could analyze and what I could realize out of this journey is that we should not, at least not to a large extent, not let it stretch more than 2 months. 60 days is a long time to, after that things really start washing off and you start forgetting things, and the muscle memory that you're gaining through different practices, it just starts washing off from your mind, and it's just a mental memory of what you did, not the muscle memory that you gained or the skill that you gained. So I think I kept this bracket of 2 months, that initially while I'm training, I should not have more than 2 months gap. And when we go back home, there is a lot that we can do. After I went back home, I researched. So first thing that I did was to research about paragliders, different kinds of paragliders. Like I got to know EN, A, B, C, D categories, all that such and such that you had discussed in the school, while in our cap, while we were covering our theory classes. So all that you had discussed, I went back home, I researched about what DHV testing is and what kinds of tests that are done and what glider would be the best for at where I was and the glider that I was flying. So I started, and then that was the time. Initially, when I started paragliding, I had no knowledge of paragliding. I didn't watch any YouTube videos or anything. I came with more of an empty mind, a mind which was open to learning, but had no preconceived notions about things. But this was the time when I had gained some skill and some knowledge about the sport. And now was the time to, increase my knowledge when I had free time at home. So I would come after my work, I would come back and, research, watch videos, ground handling videos, people kiting in different situations, what they're telling me, I would make notes. And then I would reflect that, while I was at Kamshet for my training.
But you couldn't do any practical training or ground handling when you were out of Kamshet, right?
A very little bit of it, and that's what my challenge was. I tried to find, there was a small ground near my apartments, so I started with it. I took the help of one of my colleagues. He helped me with his ground handling glider, and I started doing it. But I realized that the kind of wind environment in that ground was very obstructed by buildings. So I gave it a go, and I might have done it for like 7 8 days, but it was very restrictive. I couldn't achieve what I mean, it was very basic.
Okay, so but you would say that if you come for 7 8 days in 2 months, that is good enough for someone to retain the skills and then to pick it up from there and keep pushing forward, keep moving forward, right?
Absolutely. If you structure your training, if you have a sense of clarity as to how you are going about and where you are lacking and what you have to improve, you can crack it in that manner.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Vrun. Thank you.
Okay, I think you
And
can
one
go
very
to,
right, sir.
go ahead. I mean, I just wanted to say you could start with the section 2.
So again, the electricity went. Just a second.
We can hear you very clearly, actually.
Yeah. So one part that I missed in my the journey part was that the idea initially when I started training, things seemed like the way I was going about it, I was in a very kind of a rush attitude. I wanted to crack takeoff on the 5th or 6th day. I thought I would be able to do it. And, as I went about this journey, I mean, at a later point in time, there came a time where I was, where when I went for the takeoff actually, and I deflated my glider twice, I realized that the skills are not enough and it's not a piece of cake. And with this realization, I, transformed that rush into the details of how things were happening with the help of my instructors. And in this scenario, especially, my instructors played a very important role. They did not tell me on my face that I was rushing things. They took me to Tar Hill, Sachin sir and Ankush sir. They took me to Tar Hill and they made me do the takeoff. Obviously, besides me to help me out. And after those two deflations, I realized that it's not a piece of cake and it would require a lot and lot of hard work and to gain those skills, to work on those skills. And, things would come with the time. And I have to give that due time and that sense of perseverance to achieve, to come to a level where I would be able to do the takeoff in the right manner. So with that, I would like to, I think the electricity has come back. So I'll go back to my place. So the next part is about the observations and the learning. Of it I have discussed. So how did I gain the kind of the pace in learning which I gained? And as I talked about, that things might seem different initially, and as you go about the training, there you get the clear picture of the situations, the kind of skill that you need. And so the hard work which was required and the homework which was required, the feedback from the instructors, all these things, they helped me out in keeping the pace in the training. I'll talk a little more about it in the part where I'm talking about how I planned my training. So the next point that I want to make is the importance of visualization and how I used it. So after a training session, when I used to go back home, I always knew where I was lacking. So suppose it is, for example, takeoff. So I would go back home, I would watch videos and make a little note in my mind how this guy is doing and what it is doing, to visualize it in my own sense as to how can I do it. And whenever I came back to Kamshet for kiting, when I started doing kiting, that visualization reflected in my practical training, in my practical skill levels. So this is how, the power of visualization and the power of homework helped me. And paragliding is a sport which involves both the physical and mental aspects of our body. One very important realization it was. And when I say physical, kiting requires a lot of effort initially, even later on. But initially, it's something which is hard work, basic, simple hard work. You won't get. I mean, initially it would seem so difficult to keep the glider, and you are like physically you are not that active at that moment. Like when I went uh, for my initial training, I was not physically very active. I was not like I was just running, and there was not a lot of physical activity which was going around. So kiting helped me understand about my physical levels, where I am, and as I kept doing it, my stamina improved, and my body became more fit, and I was feeling more fit from the inside. And when I talk about the mental aspect, it is the body mind coordination. Paragliding is a sport which involves both the body, which is our core, and the mind, the motor skills and the knowledge and a sense of observation and consciousness. So they both work in conjunction and in a synchronity together. And in this way, our consciousness, our sense of observation, it increases tremendously. And while flying, there would be moments when I felt so connected with myself in that moment alone in the sky. I felt this sense of synchronity in me that I am connected to myself, I am connected to my glider and to the environment, what is happening around me and nature. So the next thing that I realized was that being in direct touch with nature taught me a lot. Some basic things I would share with you, the practical things, like once we were at Tar Hill and we were paragliding, and there was this bird, this kite, which had a small piece of wood in her hands, in her claws, and she was releasing it, diving down to catch it, and it came back again up, and then she was doing it again and again and again. So Ankur sir particularly made me see it, and it made me realize that even birds, they practice their skills. In order to catch a prey, they have to keep practicing, and it's an effort which is required on a consistent basis. So, and there were another aspect of it was the enhancement in sense of observation. I was able to see the natural processes from a different eye, from a different perspective when I came to paragliding. Because in paragliding, we do nothing but sit and observe. And while in our busy lives, the observation part is something which we lack a lot, because we are always busy with thoughts and our mind is completely filled with thoughts. But in that moment, we are free to just observe and learn. And next thing I want to talk about is body awareness. So for example, when I was initially doing the takeoffs, my hand movement, like from rear to the front and the brake application, I had no idea where my hands were. And I had to consciously observe my hand movements. So when I started doing it, initially the drawback was that inadvertent brake application every single time was leading to drifts on takeoff, and it was a dangerous situation. So the moment I started making this conscious effort of being aware of my body, being aware of my hand every single time while in that busy environment of taking off, it grew with this paragliding journey, this simple ability of body observation. And how it helped me is that when I was flying, even like when I'm trying to core a thermal and I'm in a situation wherein air is a little rough, but even then my mind knows where my hands are and how much input they are giving, both my hands, the kind of input that they're giving to the paraglider and how it is reacting to it. So the sensing power of the hands, it increased because I was aware of my body. Next thing that I want to talk about is stress and fear management. Whenever I was going for the takeoff, especially right from the initial point, even now, there's a sense of fear and sense of there's this my stress levels. I can easily, see that my stress levels are high. I'm becoming more nervous and my heartbeat is increasing. But I did this simple act of just focusing on my breath in that moment. And when I did it, when I started focusing on my breath, what happened is I became more observant. Rather than focusing on that nervous energy, my focus went on the environment and how the day was evolving and what all I had to do to make to get my takeoff right. So I could prioritize, and that energy actually got converted into this prioritization of the steps that I have to take. And this skill is something which I even use in my profession and in my personal life. And whenever I come back, as I told, whenever I come back from paragliding, when I come back home, the kind of energy that I have and the the changes in my behavior in terms of all the behavioral aspects of paragliding, my family can easily perceive that, and they always compliment me that whenever you come back after paragliding, you are very energetic and you are very calm and composed. So these are the observations which really gave me the importance of the hard work that I had put in and the skills that I was achieving, not just in terms of paragliding, but in terms of life and in terms of the behavioral aspects. So another aspect that I would like to discuss about is uh, something which is not a part of paragliding as a sport, but whenever after a day of hard work, like flying and all, and whenever we used to come back at the base in our school, and in the evening time we used to gather and discuss things, have those beautiful conversations, and do different activities like playing damsharas or some board game, and use that uh, use that time. So very beautiful kind of conversations came up, and it was a different environment for me. I mean, as a professional pilot, we remain in a very closed environment, working all the time and being with the aviation people. But it was a time where I could meet other people from diverse backgrounds, discuss things, and I found a platform where I could express myself better because people connected with me. People saw who I am, and I mean, I could learn from their journeys of life. So it was a very wholesome kind of an experience, not just the paragliding part, but this part as well. So it really helped me a lot in understanding myself, understanding people, and working on different aspects. And another thing I realized is that paragliding is a very good way of traveling. I had always this desire to travel, but the idea to go to a place and just keep it a part of a bucket list and tick it, like going to a city and just roaming around and coming back from it to post photos on Facebook, didn't seem the right kind of traveling to me. I wanted to make it more of a learning experience for me to go and meet people there and see their cultures and really understand their life. So this was a conscious effort from my side to choose the sport to travel, so that I, whenever I'm going somewhere, I have to interact with the local pilots to understand the topography and the weather and everything about that place. So I have to interact with people, and then I mean, it would form a group and we would work in a place where we all are working together. So that's a way where that's a way of traveling where we could connect with people, connect and go to the remotest place on earth and fly there, and uh, that kind of a scenario. So yeah, I think this is where the observations and the learning part ends. Any questions?
Varun, just as you're talking about visualization, your evening talks, especially you and Avi used to talk a lot on life and spirituality and stuff. So, I remember your preparation when you were in the SIV course. So clearly, I could remember and relate to the things which you are talking about. And what personally I would take away from the stuff you talked about is it's just not about the 7 days, 10 days, 20 days you spend in the school, but what happens after that when you are in your day-to-day life, and are you reading about paragliding, or it's just that are you watching the clouds, you're watching the birds, and are you really connected with what you have learned? Even that thing really matters when you are progressing. Am I right? That's what you meant?
Absolutely right, sir. And also the behavioral aspects, which is very important. I mean, it really helped me in all the spheres.
Okay, okay. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the really, I think for everyone, if they are really planning their progression, I think what you have really touched upon is very important. That it's not about those 7 days, 3 days, or 10 days what you do in school, but when you go and when you are coming back again, what kind of prep you do will define again your progression. So yeah, that's really nice, guys. Any questions anyone wants to ask? You can. Come in and you can ask the question. If we don't have any questions, we can move ahead. Anyone? Okay, Sham sir, you have question? Yes, please come.
Hi, sir.
Yeah, hi, Varun. Thanks for your lovely talk on how your journey towards paragliding was. Sachin, good to see you.
Thank you, sir.
And yeah, my question is, we all talk about our highlights and the good of paragliding, and so you need to give us something about, what was the worst experience that you had in paragliding, other than the beer one that I heard, where you had a nasty takeoff, or you came out of it unscathed. So was that your worst experience, or cause I know I went for an interview sometime in New Zealand, and I was prepared for a. Uh, I did everything, all my good points, what I did on ship, and I handled this business and I handled that. But the first ball that he put to me was, okay, so what were the things that went wrong, and how did you resolve that? And I
Hmm.
was stumped, because I had prepared for everything that was good. Oh, I had done this and I did this, and also. Uh, I'm not trying to stump you, but it's just a question so that we know what went wrong. Your worst this thing, that shook you up. It happened to me also. Avi knows about it, but it happened at a later stage. And it shook you up. And how did you regain your confidence?
There were two incidents. One I've already discussed about, and it was the major one, but there was another incident which happened in my training, but this was the one which really shook me up actually. So what happened is that when, as I told you, after the initial training, I went in December for 4 days, you know, clubbing my leaves and being very hasty about it. I was like, I didn't have much time and I wanted to utilize this time. So after flying, after like doing a flight at night, and then I rushed to Pune, and next day I started with the training. What happened is I was doing it, but I was fatigued, and how this fatigue later, translated into. So I was practicing reverse takeoff with Ganesh sir, and what happened is when every time I was landing, I was taking the glider, mushroom it, and taking it on my shoulder and going back again. So my harness was troubling me. So I removed my leg straps once, and I went back again, and in a haste at that moment, since wind picked up, so I wanted to like go in that moment, and Ganesha said, okay Varun, it's your turn. I did not get the straps in the place. So when I did the takeoff, the moment I inflated and turned, and the moment my weight came on the glider, I realized it is slipping up. So I just deflated the glider at that moment, and Jitu sir was also shouting from the back, deflate, deflate, stop, stop, stop. So I just deflated the glider in that moment. But this experience, the small incident, it really shook me initially because I made a blunder of not doing my pre-flight checks. And I mean, this idea of, hasting things, of doing things in a manner where I'm just like, after the flight, I'm coming back to training and I want to do it now. I discussed about it further with instructors and with the captain sir also, that, okay, from now on, I have to give a small gap between my work and my training, and I have to rest also. So rest is also very important. And also, as I touched upon that Bilaspur incident, so yeah, that was also it basically. Frankly, I came unhurt, so it didn't become that big, but the plunge was, it was a 25-30 feet plunge, and at that moment also I was hasty. I was in a kind of a rush attitude. I had forgotten my helmet from my kit at the place where we were living, so I rushed there and came back, running, and then I connected myself and I went for the takeoff without giving it's my due time to rest, breathe, and then go for the takeoff. So those were the mistakes which later I realized that, okay, I have to transform this rush into learning. I have to remain calm and do things in a slower manner. So when I went to fly independently for the first time, these were the incidents which really helped me in keeping my decision making in a way that I was rested and I was taking things slowly. Like the first flight that I did, it was just a top down. I did not do much. I did not thermal or anything. I just wanted to get the hang of like how things are there in that moment. And then I progressed. So these were the two incidents, sir.
Thank you, Varun. So
No
if you
problem.
don't have any questions, then we can move on.
Right, sir. So the next part is
about
how.
about the glider, you deliberately have kept it for later. Like, is it now? Are you going to discuss that now? That when did you get your glider and how did it help you to progress?
Okay, I'll discuss it now.
Okay.
I mean, in the training part, yeah, it can be a part of the training.
Okay.
So yeah, choosing my glider. How it happened is that in my initial training only, Ankush sir gave me Epsilon 7. It was maybe the 11th or 12th day after completing CC. And I got this Epsilon 7 and we went to the girlfriend site. And the moment I did the takeoff, at that moment, it was an assisted takeoff. But the moment after that, I started flying it, I really felt good about the glider. I mean, the kind of handling that the glider, it was very prompt, and the kind of movements that were there, I could feel a connection with it, and that was the moment, as I talked about, that first thermaling experience. So it was at girlfriend side. Winds were not that strong, and I was instructed into a thermal, and I could turn that glider efficiently in a way that I was in the thermal and I kept myself in the thermal. So even the instructor also, complimented me on that. That the training part is, you are at the initial part, but you're able to do it. So the major part of it was my, the glider that I got, and I really loved it. And later on, I bought that glider from the school, but that decision came after a lot of research about different paragliders. And since I had already flown it and I felt really good about it, so that made me decide that, okay, this is the glider that I want. So, as I said, when I went back home, saw many paragliding forum discussions on different paragliders. One simple reason of choosing Epsilon 7 was that its behavior in case of asymmetric collapses was very benign. It was not very dynamic. And Ankush sir must have said like 1,000 times that asymmetric collapses on a takeoff or in different situations are a real killer. They really get people in a situation, if they don't know, then they get them into very difficult situations. And until you have done an SIV or a basic SIV, you don't practice them. So for the initial part, I wanted a glider which was safe. And I focused a lot on safety as well as handling. And since this glider was the handling I had already seen and it was safe to fly, I chose it. So coming to the point where I'm talking about the training part. So what I did is that I broke paragliding into three different phases actually. That was takeoff phase, the flying phase, and the landing phase. In the takeoff phase, so for the takeoff, say kiting is required, and like practicing takeoff is required. So I kept it segregated basically, so that I can check or I can analyze my performance in all these three different phases separately. And how it helped is that I did not lack in any of them as I was progressing in my training. If suppose flying was happening good, I would give more focus on my takeoff skills. And now the takeoff is happening. Now I have to focus more on spot landings, and I have to focus more on, trying different approaches. So, it really helped me match my skill levels in all the three different segments. So this is the first part that I did. And the second thing that I did was, already discussed about it, importance of kiting. So I kited a lot, and I want to, no matter how much I stress on this particular aspect, but mix your flying with your kiting. And one who, initially when we are learning, one who kites a lot, especially in the training part, they can easily understand this simple aspect of, having that amazing control over your glider, or that balance with your glider. The balance will only come when you spend more time with it, especially on the ground. So the third aspect of it, the training part, is to plan your leaves in a manner that they coincide with the flying programs, so that you fly at different sites. In order to fly independently, we must have the experience of flying at different sites and understanding different scenarios. That's where we get to know what kind of winds, and how those kind of strong and weak wind, and laminar flow, turbulent flow, thermic flow. So there are so many diverse factors which we have to consider, and we can only get the knowledge of it if we go to different sites and fly and get to know them, especially with our instructors, because we are in a very safe environment, and we can experiment with things with them at our side. So later, when I went for independent flying, this was something which really helped me in gaining insight into all kinds of different kinds of flying, and mixing them up and learning from each one of them what was different. And believe me, flying a paraglider at a particular site is in itself is a very different kind of an experience. So it basically enhances your skills and your ability to fly the paraglider better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I've summed up the training part.
Okay, guys, any questions? Anyone wants to come in, ask questions?
Oh, I could ask you a question. It seems what is at the bottom of all this is, your hunger. You're very earnest. You have a methodical mind because of your profession. You're able to plan things well. Where do you find your motivation? I think you're highly motivated, and that, I think, propels you to go about your planning and making time for your flying, which is hobby and passion. So, can you talk a little bit about where do you get the energy, the motivation to go for it? Yeah, that's the question.
Sure, sir. So I would talk about it from the beginning part of my life. Basically, as a child, I was always inquisitive about consider carpentry. So when our house was getting built and the carpenters were there, so I always used to sit beside them and see what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I used to trouble them a lot, because the moment I used to come back from my school to the farm, and I would just go to them and sit with them and trouble them a lot. So I didn't like me touching their tools, but I was always into woodworking, into carpentry, and I wanted to do it. So even when I used to go to my nanny's place, they used to hide all these tools. But then later, I would just find them and put the nail in one of the wooden part which I would find, and just do something about it. So this part was always there. And even at a later point in time, when I started flying in Hyderabad, I started carpentry. One afternoon, I just went out, bought a set of tools, basic tools, and I started with it. And when I started, I had no knowledge. It's just that the observations that I had made at that point in time, and with the help of YouTube videos, all this knowledge, it started helping me a little bit about carpentry. So I did carpentry for almost 2-3 years before paragliding. And even this skill taught me a lot. It taught me a little about skill building. As from scratch, I had no knowledge and no skill about it. From there, I went on to, gaining some skills on my own with the help of the educational videos and my observations as a child. And this particular scenario, it 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 paved the path for, paragliding, because I realized one thing, that what matters the most to me is learning in life. Learning is like very important for me. I mean, and there is so much to learn that one lifetime is like nowhere close to, but the more you learn, the more you enhance yourself as a human being, the more the knowledge that you acquire from doing different things, trying different things and experimenting. Experimentation is very important for, for gaining knowledge. And when you learn, uh, I mean, how to describe it as something. So the energies that flow in you, they get a direction. We all, as human beings, we all have this energy side. And what helped me is that I could use the energies which I have in me in a constructive manner. And that really gave me a lot of motivation. And that's how I felt very motivated when I was doing what I was doing.
Okay, Vrun, I have a question because I've
Hanji
always
sir.
wondered. We have such a big club community. So, how the group dynamics, and when as a pilot, when you grow, you must have met like maybe more than 100 pilots during your journey, where you have went to Panchgani, Bali, Veer, so many places. So, how the group dynamic works, especially when you talk to someone who is I mean, as experienced as you, and they are contradicting with what instructors are suggesting. So, how do you manage such kind of information?
So how I understand group dynamics is basically people with, you know, a group has its own energy, and that energy works very different from an individual energy, you know. So what really makes a group more dynamic and more helpful is that a person, each individual has his own set of thoughts and a thought process. And when these different thought processes, they combine, the kind of knowledge that you gain from it is very, very enhancing. And it's different from that individual perspective, especially in a field like paragliding where safety matters. Safety depends on, knowledge and skills and different experiences. When someone had a bad incident or a good achievement, when they discuss it, and we get to learn from their mistakes and their achievements. And that's really beautiful, because when I'm going for my flying, I would want to use that knowledge and, prevent any difficult situation for me. So group in a group, uh, like for example, briefings and debriefings, they are that this is something which I really liked about Temple Pilots, because even in my academy where I learned flying, so briefings and debriefings is an integral part of aviation. And it is so must to, before we are going for what we are going, we must know what the plan is, how we are going to go about it. When we do it, and when we see how it is going, and then when we come back and we discuss about it. So different people in a day, suppose for example, if we take a day and different people experience different things. Someone had a challenge on takeoff, someone had a challenge on landing, someone had a challenge on flying, he was not able to do 360s properly. So we would discuss 10 different things in a single debriefing. So there was a lot of knowledge which was involved. And if it would had been just one instructor and one student, it would just be like one perspective out of 10. So that's how I believe that group dynamics and the behavioral aspect, the human aspect of it, when we consider the human factors. So this is something which I learned from my profession, working in a closed environment with very different people, different kinds of personalities, in aviation. So uh, if we keep ourselves open, if we keep ourselves, grounded and open to people. We don't need to, when I say open, I don't mean that we share the secrets, but when I say open, I mean that keep your energies open and be a kind of a person who people, you are always open to sharing what you know or what you have gained, and you're open to discussions. So this is something which I realized it helped me a lot in my commercial flying, and there, in paragliding in all different spheres. How it helps is that when a person sees that the other guy is open to things, that person, that the good energies that are in that person, they come out. That person would not want to cheat you. That person would not want to like trick you. That person will show his best side to you. And it really helps. That kind of an energy environment that you create around you, it really helps you a lot in these scenarios, in behavioral aspects. So I would take an example like working with instructors and working in a close contact you guys have been my friends, so I could discuss always anything with you. I never hid anything, or whatever was happening inside me, I would always share it with you. So there were moments when you said no. Like I was like, I wanted to practice kiting on the Tower Hill, and I asked an instructor and he said no. So it would feel a little bad. I wanted to do it. That's why I went. But at a later point, or even then, I would be like, it's okay. If he's asking me to stop or not do it, there must be a reason behind it. So I would just calm myself down and relax and just go about it in a free manner. And I would not take it as something which has happened wrong or anything. But later I would understand why he stopped me from that. Maybe 2-3 months down the line or 6 months down the line, and I would understand why he did not make me do it. So it's not always the good that is happening. There's sometimes things happen in a manner that we are not able to connect, but you have to wait and you have to be there. So things work out. Things always work out.
Okay, thank you.
Did I answer you?
Yes.
Thanks.
So we can move on. I think the last point is left from your structure, right? So we can move on.
So the last part is balance, the balance part. And when when I thought about the balance part, so initially there was no balance. Frankly, initially it was all hard work and dedication and perseverance, and things were not very visible at that moment. Things were much in clouds and visibility was very less. But as I went on doing it, I kept doing it more and more and more, and I did not stop because of those disappointments which I had. I did not stop myself from practicing takeoffs 1,000 times or practicing landings 1,000 times, because if there were moments where I was stopping or I was not feeling motivated, but I would just do it for the sake of doing it. It might not have motivated me that day, but I was practicing it. But when I kept doing it more and more and more and more, it just started happening somehow. So one very important realization which I had was that though paragliding involves a lot of fun and thrill, we really enjoy flying and it is very thrilling. It's an adventure sport. There is a sense of seriousness which is required. There's a sense of maturity and sense of responsibility for our own lives which is required. And what really makes us safe is the skills and the knowledge that we gain out of our training. Everything that we do in our training, it is something which really helps us being safe. There are moments where we get into difficult situations which are out of the experience that we had. So that is something which is different. But otherwise, as suppose where I am now in this moment, my safety threshold is completely defined by the kind of training that I had, the kind of skills that I acquired, and the kind of knowledge that I acquired. So every small thing, all the basics that I worked hard for, basics are really, really important for me. Consider it anything. So when I worked on my basics, I got my basics right. I had a strong foundation, and all I had to do was now build that little building at that strong foundation. So all the advanced things came after that strong basics. So keeping that in mind, when I talk about the balance part, see, initially I did not, there was no balance as I talked about, but when I started with this journey, when I started doing things the way they were happening, you know, everything that I gained from paragliding, like as I talked about the behavioral aspects, that the sense of calmness, this sense of learning and fear and stress management skills, they really affected my behavior as a human. And everybody, you know, there was a moment where I was having a discussion about my father, discussion with my father about something, and I was talking completely on a different note. I was discussing about how things were going in my professional area, and he looked at my girlfriend and said, Varun has lost fear because of paragliding. And I was like, I got goosebumps in that moment. I mean, how could he realize it? I know he's my father and he knows me throughout, but until then, it didn't strike me in that manner that, okay, I might not have like completely lost fear, but I've learned to manage my fears. And learning these skills, you know, learning all these things, they were the ones which helped me in, you know, at one point in this journey to, you know, strike that balance. So balance came at a later point, not at the beginning, but when it started happening, when it started surfacing, it was beautiful. So one very important thing that I wish to talk about is that integrate paragliding with your life, make it a part of your lifestyle. Your life, your work, and paragliding, they're not different. They are actually, they always complement each other if you know how to connect them. And the way it works is really, really beautiful. And that's where, you know, that's where my journey so far ends and all that I had to share. So I'm open for questions. And this is where the talk comes to an end.
What you said in the end was really beautiful, that it's more of a lifestyle and it really complements your life. So this is something which I can totally relate to, Varun. So yeah, beautifully said.
Thank you, sir.
Do we have a question?
Okay, I'll ask a question. Small one.
Sure, sir.
The days that you know subtly that you're distracted, or there's something telling you that you're not 100%, because on every other day you're more sensitive, so you know what the feeling is.
Absolutely, sir.
As again somebody who's more ignorant to it, what is your mechanism? Do you respect it? Do you push it? Do you work through it?
No, I do all the three actually. I respect it. First, as I said, body awareness. So I'm aware of where I am, or what my energy level is, what my motivation level is, where I stand. I start with it. Then what I do is I prioritize. With this energy level, what can I achieve? I won't be able to do my best. I'm pretty sure of it. That, I mean, if I'm like going for a flight, so the takeoff would not happen in the best possible manner. But the idea would be to do it and learn, because we are not always at our best. And things cannot go in a way that only on our best days we would want to do something. Even with that kind of an energy level which we have, we can achieve. It's not that it's not fruitful at all. So whatever is available with you, work with it. And how it helps is that even in those moments, you understand that I can learn and I can work with it. So even in, Shabad sir, as we consider aviation also, you know, not every day is a good day at flying. Sometimes we wake up and we realize that, okay, we are not in this moment. We are like, my mind is somewhere else. So we strive hard to bring ourselves back when we enter the aircraft to go for that flight. And, you know, we bring back ourselves to an extent that things are well within the safety threshold. So the same thing applies here, that you just work with what you have, and it works beautifully.
Any other questions, Ashu sir?
Yeah, Faisal Khan sir asked a question. So he asked, what are my ambitions? So yeah, before this talk, I was just having a chat with my friend on a video call, and his sister, so she asked me, we were talking about paragliding since I was going to give this talk. So she asked me, Varun, ab to tu competitions वगैरह में जाएगा, India को represent करेगा. So I told her very frankly that I'm not into competitions. I don't want to like achieve something. I'm already achieving a lot from paragliding. Even in this moment, there's a lot that I'm learning, and it is really shaping me as a person. So I don't have any like, yes, I want to go for cross countries. That experience, I'm pretty sure that's going to be an amazing experience for me, because when I even look it on a, when I even see it on a video, I can relate to it, that it's going to be an amazing experience. So I have a wish to go for cross countries. I have a wish to a lot of wish to like fly in the mountains and go hike and fly. So right now the aim is to work on the skill level in a manner that I'm able to safely do hike and fly flights. So that is where my motivation is. And when I did SIV, this handling scenario also really, it really clicked to me that, acro is also another scenario. So maybe at a later point in time, but right now it's more about understanding the glider well and hike and fly and cross country. So this is what the motivation and ambition is. Ambition per se, I think I'm already, I don't have any sort of like, I want to reach somewhere or achieve a goal or like win a particular competition or anything. No, it's not there. But what I really wish to achieve is to do my flights safely and gain that experience, like go on a hike and fly and stay a night at a completely remote place. So that's something which really, really excites my imagination, and I really would want to do it.
Thanks a lot, Vrun. This is Faisal. And yeah, it will be great. Once you want to fly hike and fly and you come to Switzerland, I'll be really glad to take you to a remote place and fly from there.
Thanks a lot. See, that gave you direction.
Great.
Thank you.
I think the next session from Faisal will also help you, Vrun, because he will be going to talk about one of his amazing expedition. So,
sure.
Can I ask something to Varun?
Looking forward to it.
Okay,
Arif, sir.
Hi, Varun.
Hi, sir.
Varun, you said when Shabad asked you a question, you said sometimes even if you don't have your mind, you still go for your flying, like you're a commercial pilot. You said still you have to go, but that's your job. But I don't think that will apply to paragliding. Avisa, do you agree with me? I don't think if you don't have a mind, you should not take off.
Sir, I would like to clarify one thing.
I like Avisa to add something to it, please.
So can I just clarify a single small point about it before?
I know.
In advance, I'm sorry.
Everybody is aware of the situation that Arif has just created. And everybody, I'm sure, wants to say something. So Arif is a lawyer, by the way. Okay,
I
know. Profession.
Okay.
So
he brought a very important point.
Yeah. So he's giving the mic to me. So Arif, I'm with you, and you're absolutely right. But I think what Varun was saying, he can clarify further that, okay, I check my energy levels and I see, okay, maybe it's a good idea not to fly because the energy levels are maybe really low. We talk about this all the time in the mental aspect, being aware of, my mental status, my, psychological makeup today. So what Varun, I think, was saying was that depending on the energy level, I plan my flight. And if the energy level is such that I do realize that, okay, my God, it's a good idea not to fly, then you take a good decision that not to fly. But yes, he's bringing a very good point, and you can clarify yourself.
Can I add something?
Of course, Varun, after you finish, Ashu sir is going to bring on his comment and his perspective on this.
So one thing that I wish to clarify is when I said the mind is not into it, is basically, it's not that the mind is, assessing your energy level, assessing, the mind not might not be exactly at the level where you feel enervated to do it, you feel motivated to do it. So it's not that the thought system is affected, it's just that the energy levels, they fluctuate, and every day it's a different kind of a scenario for you. So yeah, as you said, I mean, I'm a kind of a person even in aviation, if I don't feel like flying, I don't go. I just report. I mean, when I have any health issues or anything, even if I'm tired, I'm fatigued, I report fatigue and I don't go for the flight. So obviously that is obviously there. That is a part of it. So yeah, that's a clarification.
Thanks,
Ashu sir. Ashu sir.
Yeah, okay. There are another two ways of looking at this. I completely agree with what Varun is saying. I just add another dimension to the whole thing. Now, what happens is that in the same way as any flying body has its envelope that it can fly in, a wing will fly from a minimum speed to a maximum speed. It can sustain a certain amount of gust without, deforming in the air or whatnot. So it's got a certain envelope within which that thing can work and fly and remain sensible in its behavior. In a similar way, every pilot has a defined envelope in which he can work. That envelope is defined by your knowledge, your skill sets, your abilities, your physical attributes, fitness, etc. So at any given moment, depending on what you want to do on that particular day, there is a defined envelope within which you're going to fly. And at no stage should that envelope be outside that day's your personal envelope. So as long as you sustain that, this particular flight I'm planning requires this skill set, it requires these levels of knowledge, it requires these physical capabilities, etc. And if your skill sets, abilities, knowledge on that particular day is within that, you're safe. And if you're extending it, it could be in any dimension, in the dimension of knowledge, in the dimension of physical requirements, then there is a risk that will occur and with its own consequences. And it is a sport, it's a dangerous sport. You can hurt yourself and be out of the business for a very long time, and which you don't want to do. You want to remain, always be able to fit and fly and be around. So as long as you keep reminding yourself of that dimension of your own abilities and your envelope and keep it inside, I think you'll be fine. It requires, unless you're a really masochist kind of a person who's out to prove something, and injure yourself in the process. Most of the time, I think most people are reasonably sensible. And what happens is that because the sport is dangerous, sometimes you don't intend to be, let's say, be foolhardy or push yourself. But things happen, There was a day when, we were doing simple training, everything is fine, but the winds are reasonably strong. And, on the left-hand side, as you're facing down, there's a bit of a venturi there. And one day, when I was doing some kiting there, the thing, grabbed me and dragged me. I was well within my envelope. I'm just doing kiting. But the damn thing dragged me and, I fell all over the place and scratched myself and whatnot. It can happen, So, things that happen, but they're not deliberate. You're not deliberately going outside your envelope. So that's the only thing. As long as you're not doing something out of dash and bravado and something which is there. There's always an element of risk. You will take risk mitigation naturally. But you spoke very well, Varun. Very nice. It's really good to see.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Yeah, very, very nice to see your journey through. Excellent.
Thanks a lot, sir. And as you said, sir, I would like to you are exactly what I wanted to say. I might not have said it in that manner, but it's exactly how I approach it. So for example, one last example is, suppose I wake up and I find myself not in a zone where I can fly. I would go to kiting because kiting is not that dangerous, and I would choose a place which is more safe. So that's where I would utilize my energies. So maybe that was something which I wanted to. So analyzing your energy level and utilizing your day in a way that at least you don't waste it. Yeah. And if you are if the energy levels are down, if you don't feel like, don't do it. It's as simple as that.
See, the biggest the thing is, nobody can look inside your brain to see your personal condition. It's your self-awareness. And if you're not honest honest with yourself in this self-awareness, then you can land up in a lot of shit. So self-awareness and honesty about it to yourself. And that definitely requires a certain degree of discipline. I mean, otherwise you're asking for trouble.
Okay, thank you, Ashu sir. That's actually a subject in itself. Ashu sir mentioned about self-awareness. I mean, I took up paragliding because of this reason that I'll not go to sleep in my life. One has to be awake, and we teach you in the capsules in school. Capsule we start from capsule 3 itself. To be aware of your energy levels, to be aware of your emotions, to be aware of your stress. That is the first step. Only if you're aware of what's happening here and be honest about it, only then can you take the second step of being able to manage it. So awareness is the first step, and then managing. Aware of your stress levels, managing the stress levels. Aware of your fears, managing those fears.
Managing your fears.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, it's a huge topic in itself. And it all comes to like self-awareness, because there are so many factors, like Ashu sir mentioned, that will be affecting your flight and your energy levels. So one needs to be honest and one needs to be aware to take the best possible decision for yourself. And nobody can like peek in. I mean, you have to do it for yourself. That's why flying, like, it is a dangerous sport. It is risky. And that's why the awareness levels have to be really high to take smarter, better decisions. That is why the practice, the skill and the knowledge, and these gatherings like this that mature us as a pilot, learning from other people's journeys and experiences, is enriching you and making you a better pilot. So yeah, so do we have more questions, or do we conclude it?
There is
Set?
one